It's time for news from around the world, and meanwhile in. Meanwhile in Iran, they've got a new leader too. It's happening all over the place. Ebrahim Raisi, a hardline judge who's currently under US sanctions for human rights abuses, secured a landslide victory on Saturday in Iran's presidential election after a contest marked by voter apathy. Hey, they're just like us. Over economic hardships and political restrictions. A little bit of information about Raisi, said to have been part of a so-called death committee. One of 4 judges who oversaw secret death sentences for about 5,000 prisoners in jails near Tehran. It says the location of the mass graves, according to Amnesty International, where the men and women were buried, is being systematically concealed by the Iranian authorities. And as we pointed out, participation in the election was very low at 48.8%, or like standard US participation. More than 70% actually voted back in 2017. So the United States is saying there's concerns about the actual fairness of the election. That could be entirely true. I generally don't automatically accept the US pitch of which elections are legitimate and which are not. I feel like we've gotten it wrong a few times. But that said, David, we've got a new leader in Iran, as Biden is potentially looking to restart some sort of diplomatic relationship there. What do you think about this development? Does that make the job any easier, any harder?
You know what? In some ways, I think it makes it easier because, and regarding the elections and whether it was clean or not, the reality is he is the new leader of Iran. He still has to report to the Grand Ayatollah, so you could argue that the Grand Ayatollah is the one who really sort of controls the presidency. But in any case, the fact that they have decided, whether through democracy or through through voting or through the Grand Ayatollah, that they want a hardliner in place, I think it makes it a little bit more predictable now for the Biden administration, that they understand that there are going to be certain red lines, there are going to be certain issues where the Biden administration is going to have a very difficult time. Ironically, it hasn't stopped some progress being made in Vienna in terms of negotiations with US negotiators and Iranian negotiators over a new sort of nuclear deal. So it may be that there's flexibility on the Iran and the United States re-entering a nuclear deal, but maybe there's no flexibility in terms of how Iran treats its own sort of dissidents, its own people within Iran, or even its sort of funneling of missiles and arms to Hezbollah and others across the Middle East. Maybe there's no stopping it, but at least now the Biden administration has a very clear view on who they're dealing with. And sometimes I think that can make negotiating easier, even if the outcome still remains pretty difficult.
Yeah, and for people who are watching this that are thinking, well, I want to make sure that we have some sort of influence that we can push for, increased concerns for human rights and all of that. Well, we need to have a relationship if we're going to do that. And supposedly Raisi he says he's going to remain committed to the deal. Wants to get the sanctions removed. What's interesting in this case, so that's all good news and expected. I'm a little bit more worried about US-based hardliners when it comes to the future of this deal, because trying to reestablish the status quo diplomatically that we had before Donald Trump, that seems like a reasonable thing to do. But I imagine many Republicans, especially those gearing up for the midterms, those who are thinking about potentially running for president, are going to take any attempt to reestablish diplomacy with Iran as unacceptable and attack Biden accordingly. I think that's a pretty safe prediction, correct?
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because you'll see these hardliners in the United States will see, they appointed a conservative hardliner in Iran. So why on earth would the Biden administration want to negotiate with them when look who they've just made their president? And so sure, there'll be people in the United States, the domestic political audience, who will take this and run with it. But I also think that in the long run for the Biden administration, it's not going to change much. The United States is still not going to have any influence over domestic affairs within Iran. They're not going to be able to stop Iran's influence across much of the Middle East. Maybe this gives the Biden administration a little bit more in terms of what they can expect with the nuclear deal. But to your point, I mean, Iran has been a disappointment in terms of the US relationship with Iran has been a disappointment for a long time. And I'm not sure anything really changes here.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.